Hi everybody, it's Thomas here from Thomas FITZGERALD Photography, and in this video, this is going to be the first in a new series of Capture One tips designed for people who are switching from Lightroom. One of the things that confuses a lot of people about Capture One is that there's often many different ways to do the same thing, and sometimes these may not be immediately obvious. So in this video, what I hope to do is kind of highlight some of those things for you and make them a bit easier if you're switching from Lightroom. So to do that, I'm going to start this series off by taking 5 tips and showing you how to do that in Capture One. So let's start with the first one, which is the viewer controls. So if you are used to Lightroom, and you might often switch between the grid and the library module. So in Lightroom, you would do that with by pressing the D key, for example, to go into develop, or pressing the G key to go back to the grid. Because there are no separate modules in Capture One, you may be wondering, well, how do I do the same thing here? So you actually, to do this, is what calls the viewer controls. So it's slightly different, but let me just show you. It's actually quite simple. So down the side here, and this kind of is based on having the default layout, but down the side here you will normally see the film strip, and you can hide and show this by pressing Command B. If I press Command B, I will hide the film strip, and I press it again, I will show it. So if you want to switch that to going across the bottom of the screen rather than down the side, you can press Command Shift B, and this will switch it to the bottom. Now, one of the things to note when you do this is you're still viewing the thumbnails vertically. So if you look here on the top of the film strip, you will see there's a few different controls. And if you press this one here, this will turn it into a more traditional film strip. So again, kind of like how Lightroom is. And this second one will give you a list. And then this third one is just kind of your grid view. So now that I have this back on the side, if I want to hide the viewer and switch to just a grid view, I just go Command Option V. And this will now give me a grid view. So again, same command brings you back, Command Option V, and now you're back to your single view with your thumbnails. So there you have it. That's kind of simply how you do the same thing as switching between the grid and develop modules in Lightroom. Okay, so next thing is doing auto adjustments. So in Lightroom, you may occasionally use the auto adjustments command. And what that will do is kind of apply things like exposure, contrast, brightness, and so on to your image. So in Capture One, how do we do the same thing? So let me just find an image here to work with. Okay, so let's just take this image here for a second. Again, this is just nothing special. So to apply auto adjustments, you use this big A button up here in the interface. But before you do that, you'll notice here there's a little arrow beside this. So if you click and hold on this, you'll see a list of options that will get applied when you use the auto function. So you can actually turn these on and off. So say, for example, you just wanted to do auto white balance. You can turn these off. And now if I do this, it will just do auto white balance. And there's not much of a change because the white balance was pretty good as it was. So I'll just undo that. I can say do auto exposure and auto contrast and brightness. And sure, we'll turn them all on. We'll go high dynamic range as well. And now if I hit auto, you'll see it's applied a few different adjustments. If I go over here, you can see these are the adjustments that it's applied. Now, it's not great. It's not as good as Lightroom's because Lightroom is AI driven, but sometimes it does actually work reasonably well. So let me just give you another example here. So if I use this as an example, and again, we have everything set here. I'll turn levels on as well. I'll just click auto. You can see, again, it's doing quite a few adjustments. As I said, it's not great. It's not as good as Lightroom's, but sometimes it can give you kind of a good head start and get you in the ballpark to do it. Now, there is, as I said earlier, because in Capture One, there's lots of different ways of doing things, you can actually do this a different way as well. So if I go into my exposure tab here, and on each of the various different tool panels, you'll see there's a little A here. So you can actually apply auto on each of these. If I hit auto levels, for example, that actually works quite well. One of the things I have found in Capture One is that auto levels works reasonably well, and it's probably the best of the automatic functions. So again, as I said, it's not as good as Lightroom's auto levels, but it works reasonably well. and it can be a good place to start. But you will often need to actually tweak images afterwards anyway. Okay, so next thing I want to do is talk about rotation and straightening. So this is one of those things that seems to cause a bit of confusion. A lot of people have actually written to me asking me about this, so I'm going to go through some of the options with you. It's actually quite straightforward. It's a little different from the way Lightroom does it. So in Lightroom, you adjust the rotation using the crop tool, whereas in Capture One, there's actually a separate rotation tool. So if I click up here on the toolbar, you can see we have straighten, rotate freehand, rotate left, and rotate right. So rotate left and rotate right do what you think they would do. So if I click on this, they'll just basically spin the image clockwise, and then the other one will do it the other way around. Rotate freehand is kind of the tool you probably use the most. So rotate freehand, when you click and then drag on the image, you'll get a grid, and you can just rotate your image like this, and that allows you to straighten it. Okay, and then the other option is straighten. So straighten gives you a ruler that you can drag out. So if I want to drag, say, along the horizon here, like this, and this will now, whatever I'm dragging out, that will tell that to be straight. So for example, if I wanted to do it that way, I can make it crooked, and then if I follow the horizon line roughly, that will be straight. So when you're in this mode, you'll also see that there's kind of a grayed out area outside, and that's showing you the area that's going to be outside the crop. And then to get back off that, you just click back on the hand tool or the arrow tool. There are also some manual controls for this as well. So if you go over to the lens correction tab, and if you look down, you'll see rotation and flip. So here you can see angle, and that gives you the angle that it is rotated at. So you can actually manually enter a value in here as well. Okay, so while I am talking about rotation, the other thing I want to talk about is the crop tool. So as I said earlier, in Lightroom, crop and rotation are the same tool, but in Capture One, they're separate tools. So if I go to the crop tool here, and if I click on this, you'll see there's a few different aspect ratios, and then there's you can create your own custom ones. But there's also another way to get to this, and that's if you have the crop tool activated, you can just right click on this and you get this crop pop up. And that is also what you will find down in the lens correction tab. It's basically this crop panel. So I can select my aspect ratio. So say for example I want to make this square, and then you can just drag in the corners, and again I can move this around, or I can drag out a new one, and again I can just right click and change the aspect ratio. So say I want 5:7. And if you want to change the orientation of the aspect ratio, you just kind of drag it down. And then if you want to make your own custom aspect ratios, you just go in here and go add aspect ratio. And so for example, if I want to do CinemaScope, which is 2.35 to 1, you can't actually enter decimal points. So all you need to do, because it's a ratio rather than actual values, you just go 235 to 100. And we'll call this cinema. Okay, and again, you just kind of have to drag it slightly just to activate it. So now I can have my nice cinema crop here. And then to finish, again, as with the rotation tool, just click off the crop tool, so back onto say pan or arrow, and there you have it. So that is how you do cropping. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is syncing adjustments. Now, if you have made an adjustment and you want to sync that to a whole bunch of images, there's, again, as with everything in Capture One, there's lots of different ways you can do it. So I'm going to show you a few of those. So let me first just start by making some adjustments. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do something kind of ridiculous just so you can see it. So I'm not saying this is something I would normally do to an image. So I'm just going to turn the contrast up really high. And let me see, I'll bring the dynamic range up as well. Okay, so the reason I'm doing that is just so that we have something that's really visually obvious once I sync them, so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sync these edits to, say, the 5 images below it. Okay, so this kind of gets a little complicated, and this is another one of those things in Capture One that can be quite confusing for new users, so I will do my best to explain it. Let me start by selecting these images, and this is really important. Make sure you have this little icon turned on up here. So this is the toggle between edit primary and edit selected variants. So this is basically tells it to whatever changes you're going to do to everything rather than just do to the one that you have selected. And then your kind of primary select is the one with the big thick gray outline. So in Lightroom, that is, I think that the proper term is most selected. So to sync images, again, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You could do it manually by going copy adjustments and then go to each one and paste adjustments. Or you can bring up the copy and apply adjustments panel. So if I do this will bring up the adjustments clipboard. Let me just move it out here so you can see it. And what should be selected is basically everything that you've changed. And you can turn things on and off here. So what you need to do is, once you have done all these, the thing is, don't go copy, you need to actually go apply. And it's really important that you have your images selected first, and that the one you're copying from is the most selected or your primary select, and then just hit apply. And you see it's now applied all those changes. If I went copy in that panel, all it will do is copy it to the clipboard, and then you can just manually on individual images go apply adjustments. Okay, so there is another way to do this, and so let me just undo first. So let me just pick a different set of images. So I'm going to start with this, and again I'm just going to turn the contrast up really high and bring the shadows right up, just so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so this time I'm going to select some images, and if you go over to the individual panels, you will notice that we have this little icon here, which is the third in, and it's like a little double-headed arrow. So this will let you copy and paste or copy and apply just the settings from that panel. So if I click on this, again I get my adjustments clipboard, and this time you can see it's just for the options in that panel. And again, what you want to do is hit apply. So you're not hitting copy, you're hitting apply. And that will then apply all those adjustments to that panel. And again, I can do the same now for the high dynamic range ones. And again, whatever you've edited should be selected. I hit apply, and it will now apply all those changes. So that's basically how you do that. There is a third way to do it. If I go over here to the adjustments tab, and down here you'll see the adjustments clipboard, and that's basically the same as getting it from the adjustments menu. So that allows you to, again, copy and apply. Okay, so lastly, for our final tip for this episode, what I wanted to do is talk to you about the equivalent of Lightroom's quick collection. So if you want to quickly add a bunch of selects to a collection, so kind of like what you would do with the quick collection in Lightroom, and in Lightroom you do that by hitting the B key, it will add it to the quick collection, and that way you can quickly find it. I use that function all the time in Lightroom. In Capture One, there is an equivalent. It requires a little bit more setup. So let me show you what to do. So to start off with, you need to actually create a collection for this. So I'm just going to create a new album under the user collections and call this Quick Collection. Okay, and click OK. And then I'm going to right click on this and go Set as Selects Collection. So now I can add images to this a number of different ways. So you can actually, there's a tool for doing this. So if I click up here on the arrow key, you go see Move to Selects folder. So now I can add to that folder just by clicking on it. I'm going to say I want that one, and say I want that one. And if you look down here, you see my quick collection. There's now 3 images. So I'll add another one, that's 4, and that's 5. And that's actually added 2 because that's a stack. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to my hand tool here, and I'm going to just put this back on selects. So let me now go to, say, this image, and I'll just bring this up full. Okay, so the other way to add it to it is, there's this little button up here. This does the same thing. So again, if you just keep an eye on this number down here, you'll see I'm adding them to it. So that's 7. And then say this image. So that's 8 and 9. Again, that's a stack, so it's adding 2 images. And then the last way to do it, the keyboard shortcut for this is actually Command J. So if I go Command J, you can see again it's increased to 10, and I presume that's Control J on a PC. I'm using a Mac for this, by the way, because that wasn't obvious. So Command J and Command J. Okay, so there you have it. That is 3 ways to add to a quick collection. there could well be a known Capture One. There could well be different ways that I'm not even aware of. As I said at the very start of this video, they seem to like to have lots of different ways of doing things, and that's kind of one of the things I like about Capture One. But as I said at the start, it's one of those things that can be a bit frustrating for new users. So that is basically it for this video. I hope you find this kind of idea useful, and if you do, let me know in the comments below and I'll do more of this series. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out the rest of my Capture One tutorials here on YouTube. I have a whole Capture One playlist, and if you want to support the channel, check out some of the links in the description below. I also want to give a shout out to all my Patreon supporters, and thank you for supporting the channel and my blog. And if you too want to support the channel, check out my Patreon page where you will find behind the scenes content, extras and so on. And thanks everybody for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.